The sound of muffled sobs echoed through the small bathroom as Victoria pressed her back against the cold tile wall, clutching her phone with trembling hands. Maya and Zoe exchanged worried glances as they heard their mother's broken voice through the door, saying 30 days to leave the house. Victoria tried to compose herself, but the banker's words kept echoing in her mind. There were no more extensions, no more chances. "We have to do something, Zoe," Maya whispered urgently. "Mommy is going to lose our house, and we'll have nowhere to live." "But what can we do? We're just kids," Zoe whispered back, her little voice trembling with fear and confusion. "Remember that man on TV who helped build the new school? The really rich one? Alexander Cross." Maya's eyes lit up with sudden hope. The girls watched as the news showed Alexander Cross cutting a ribbon at a children's hospital, his kind smile filling the screen. Victoria emerged from the bathroom, quickly wiping her eyes and forcing a smile. "What are my girls watching tonight?" "Just the news, Mommy," Maya said casually, while her mind raced with plans to save their family from losing everything. "Sweet dreams, my angels," Victoria whispered, kissing each girl goodnight, not knowing they were about to embark on the most important mission of their young lives. After Victoria left, Maya turned to Zoe under the covers. "Tomorrow, we're going to find Alexander Cross and ask him to help Mommy." "But Maya, what if he says no? What if rich people don't care about families like us?" Zoe's voice was barely a whisper. "Then we'll make him care," Maya said with fierce determination. "We won't let Mommy lose our home. We won't let our family fall apart." The two sisters looked out their bedroom window toward the glittering downtown skyline, where somewhere among those tall buildings lived the man who could change their destiny. Meanwhile, Victoria sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and eviction notices, wondering how she would tell her daughters they might become homeless. The next morning before school, Maya began writing a letter. "Dear Mr. Cross, my name is Maya, and I need your help to save my mommy." Zoe watched her sister pour her heart onto paper, describing their situation with the innocence and honesty that only a child could express. "We'll give him this letter and show him our family picture," Maya said, folding the letter with trembling hands. "He has to help us." As they walked to school that morning, both girls knew their lives were about to change forever. They just didn't know how much. Victoria waved goodbye to her daughters, completely unaware that they were about to take the biggest risk of their young lives to save their family. What would you do if your family was about to lose everything? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to see how this incredible journey unfolds. 3 years ago, Victoria Mitchell was living a completely different life. She worked as a dedicated nurse at Austin General Hospital, known for her compassionate care and endless patience with even the most difficult patients. Her colleagues respected her, and her supervisors often praised her work ethic and gentle bedside manner. Victoria had always dreamed of helping others, and nursing gave her that purpose. She would spend extra time with lonely patients, reading to them, or simply listening to their stories when their own families couldn't visit. Her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, often said that Victoria had a special gift for making people feel cared for during their most vulnerable moments. At home, she had everything a woman could want: a loving husband named David who worked as a construction foreman, and 2 beautiful daughters who filled their modest home with laughter and joy. They weren't wealthy, but they were happy, building dreams together and planning for a future that seemed bright and secure. David would come home from work sites covered in dust, but always with a smile for his girls. They had simple traditions: movie nights on Fridays, pancakes on Sunday mornings, and bedtime stories that David would act out dramatically, making the girls giggle until Victoria had to quiet them down. Once upon a time, David would begin, changing his voice for each character, while Maya and Zoe sat mesmerized. Victoria would lean against the doorframe, watching her husband bring fairy tales to life for their daughters. These were the moments she treasured most, when their little family felt complete and unbreakable. They talked about saving for a bigger house, maybe taking a family vacation to Disney World when the girls were older. David often joked that they were living their own fairy tale, and Victoria believed him completely. Money was always tight, but they managed it together. Victoria worked her regular shifts while David picked up overtime whenever he could. They had dreams of stability. David wanted to start his own construction company, and Victoria hoped to eventually pursue her nurse practitioner degree. They would sit at their kitchen table every Sunday night, going over their budget, planning for the future. Their savings account was small, but growing steadily. They felt like they were finally getting ahead, that all their hard work and sacrifices were building towards something beautiful. That final morning started like any other. David kissed Victoria goodbye as she left for her early shift at the hospital, promising to pick up groceries on his way home from the construction site. "Love you, beautiful," he called out as she drove away. Maya and Zoe pressed their faces to the window, waving enthusiastically at their daddy as he climbed into his work truck. It was such an ordinary moment, the kind they had shared hundreds of times before. None of them knew it would be the last time they would all be together as a complete family. The call came at 2:47 p.m. while Victoria was checking on a patient in the ICU. The voice on the other end was professional but gentle, a police officer explaining that there had been an accident on Interstate 35. A drunk driver had run a red light, hitting David's truck at full speed. Victoria's knees buckled as the words sank in. Her colleagues caught her as she collapsed, the phone clattering to the floor. In an instant, her entire world shattered into a million pieces, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The funeral was a blur of flowers, condolences, and well-meaning friends who promised to help, but gradually faded away as life moved on. Victoria stood between her daughters at the graveside, feeling like she was drowning in grief, while everyone around her seemed to be breathing normally. Maya held her hand tightly, trying to be brave for her little sister, while Zoe clung to Victoria's dress, asking when Daddy was coming home. Victoria had no answers, only an overwhelming sense that she was now completely alone in the world, responsible for raising two little girls without the man who had been her anchor. The financial reality hit her like a second devastating blow. David's life insurance policy was modest, barely enough to cover the funeral expenses and a few months of bills. Without his income, Victoria realized she would need to work double shifts just to keep their heads above water. The dreams they had built together, the bigger house, the family vacations, David's construction business, all of it crumbled away, leaving only the harsh reality of survival. She stared at the stack of bills, wondering how she would explain to Maya and Zoe that everything was about to change. Victoria threw herself into work, picking up every available shift to make ends meet. She worked days, nights, weekends, anything to bring in enough money to support her daughters. Her colleagues watched with concern as she pushed herself to the breaking point, but Victoria felt like she had no choice. She was determined to provide for Maya and Zoe, to give them some semblance of the stability they had lost when David died. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford, and her own health began to suffer, but she kept pushing forward, driven by fierce maternal love and sheer desperation. Coming home, exhausted to find Maya and Zoe waiting up for her, became the new normal. The girls had learned to be more independent than children their age should have to be. Maya would help Zoe with dinner, usually something simple like sandwiches or cereal, and they would do their homework together. Victoria's heart broke a little more each day, seeing how much her daughters had grown up in such a short time, forced to become self-sufficient because their mother was working desperately to keep their little family afloat in a world that suddenly felt much more dangerous and uncertain. Victoria had been pushing herself to the limit for over 2 years since David's death, working every available shift to keep her family afloat. The constant stress and exhaustion were beginning to take their toll on her body in ways she chose to ignore. She would feel dizzy during long shifts, experience sharp pains in her back from lifting patients, and notice her hands shaking from fatigue. But Victoria convinced herself these were normal signs of overwork, nothing that a good night's sleep couldn't fix. She had her daughters to think about, bills to pay, and no time for weakness. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days caring for others' health while completely neglecting her own. Victoria began picking up even more shifts, sometimes working 18 hours straight just to make ends meet. Her colleagues started expressing concern about her pale complexion and the way she seemed to move more slowly than before. "Victoria, you need to take some time off," her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, would say, but Victoria would just smile and insist she was fine. The truth was, she couldn't afford to be anything but fine. Every missed shift meant groceries they couldn't buy, utilities that might get shut off, or another late notice from the mortgage company. She had become a master at hiding her exhaustion behind a professional smile, even as her body began to rebel against the punishing schedule she had imposed on herself. The first call from the bank came on a Tuesday morning while Victoria was reviewing patient charts. Margaret Stone, the loan officer, had a voice like ice as she explained that Victoria was behind on her mortgage payments. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need to discuss your account immediately. You've missed 2 payments now, and we're concerned about your ability to meet your obligations." Victoria's hands trembled as she gripped the phone, explaining about her husband's death, the reduced hours during her recovery, her plans to catch up. But Margaret's response was clinical and cold. The bank had policies, procedures, and Victoria's personal struggles didn't change the fact that money was owed. The meeting at First National Bank felt like a sentencing hearing. Margaret Stone spread the paperwork across her desk with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times before. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm afraid the situation has become untenable. You're now 4 months behind on your mortgage, and despite your promises, the payments continue to be missed." Victoria tried to explain about her increased work hours, her plan to catch up, but Margaret interrupted with a shake of her head. "The bank has been more than patient. We're initiating foreclosure proceedings. You have 30 days to bring your account current in full, including penalties and fees, or you'll need to vacate the property." That night, Victoria sat at her kitchen table with a calculator, desperately trying to make the numbers work. She added up her salary, subtracted expenses, calculated overtime possibilities, but no matter how she arranged the figures, the math was merciless. Even if she worked every available hour for the next month, she couldn't possibly come up with the full amount the bank demanded. The house that had been filled with so much love when David was alive now felt like a weight around her neck, dragging her family toward financial ruin. She considered selling everything they owned, but their modest possessions wouldn't even cover a fraction of what she owed. Victoria began searching for a second job, poring over classified ads and online listings for anything that would fit around her hospital schedule. She applied to work at grocery stores, retail shops, even considered cleaning offices at night after her nursing shifts. The thought of working even more hours made her feel sick with exhaustion, but she was willing to do whatever it took to save their home. Every rejection letter felt like another nail in the coffin of their financial stability. Time was running out, and Victoria felt like she was trying to hold back an avalanche with her bare hands. The calls from creditors began coming daily. Credit card companies, utility companies, medical billing departments, everyone wanted their money, and Victoria had less to give each week. She would juggle payments, paying the minimum on one bill to keep the lights on, skipping another payment to buy groceries. The stress was eating her alive, but she kept up the facade of normalcy for Maya and Zoe. She would answer collection calls in hushed tones after the girls went to bed, making promises she wasn't sure she could keep, negotiating payment plans that still seemed impossible to maintain. Keeping the truth from her daughters became increasingly difficult. Maya and Zoe were smart, observant children who noticed when their mother's smiles seemed forced, when she spent long periods staring at papers with worried expressions, when the phone calls made her voice sound different. Victoria would catch them whispering to each other sometimes, and she suspected they knew more than they let on. She tried to maintain their routines, homework help, bedtime stories, weekend activities, but the weight of their financial crisis made every moment feel fragile, like their entire world could collapse at any second. The final notice came certified mail. Victoria signed for it with shaking hands, knowing exactly what it contained before she opened the envelope. The legal language was cold and impersonal, but the message was clear. She had exactly 30 days to vacate the property. Sitting in her car in the driveway, Victoria allowed herself to fully feel the magnitude of what was happening. The house where David had proposed, where they had brought their babies home from the hospital, where every room held precious memories. All of it was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Walking back into the house, Victoria found her daughters playing quietly in the living room, surrounded by family photos and memories of happier times. They looked up at her with trusting smiles, completely unaware that their mother was carrying papers that would change their lives forever. Victoria managed to return their smiles, asking about their day and helping with homework as if everything was normal. But that night, as she tucked them in a bed in the home they might soon lose, Victoria knew that very soon she would have to find the courage to tell Maya and Zoe that their safe, stable world was about to disappear once again. Maya and Zoe had always been perceptive children, but living with a mother under extreme stress had sharpened their ability to read between the lines. They had learned to recognize the different tones in Victoria's voice. The fake cheerful tone she used when talking to bill collectors, the tired resignation when she thought no one was listening, and the barely controlled panic when she received certain phone calls. That Tuesday evening, they crept to the kitchen doorway and heard their mother's voice crack as she spoke to someone about 30 days and nowhere else to go. The words didn't make complete sense to them, but the desperation in their mother's voice made their stomachs twist with fear. "Something's really wrong with Mommy," Maya whispered to Zoe that night as they lay in their beds. "She's been crying a lot when she thinks we can't see, and she keeps getting scary phone calls." Zoe nodded solemnly, her 7-year-old mind trying to process the adult worries she sensed but couldn't fully understand. "Is Mommy sick like Daddy was?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Maya shook her head, but she wasn't entirely sure. All she knew was that the mother who used to laugh and sing while making breakfast now moved through their house like she was carrying an invisible weight that was crushing her spirit day by day. The next morning, while Victoria was in the shower, Maya and Zoe discovered a stack of papers on the kitchen counter that their mother had forgotten to hide. The red letters looked angry and threatening, even though the girls didn't understand exactly what the words meant. Maya sounded out the bigger words while Zoe traced the letters with her finger. "For cielo sure," Maya read slowly. "What does that mean?" Zoe asked, but before Maya could answer, they heard the shower turn off and quickly moved away from the papers, their hearts racing from the fear that they had discovered something they weren't supposed to see. The papers seemed to radiate danger and adult worries that made both girls feel sick to their stomachs. Victoria entered the kitchen to find her daughters unusually quiet, sitting at the breakfast table with their cereal barely touched. Something in their demeanor immediately put her on alert. The way they wouldn't quite meet her eyes, the careful way they were sitting, as if they were afraid to move too much. "Good morning, my girls," she said, trying to keep her voice light and normal. "You're both very quiet this morning. Did you sleep okay?" Maya and Zoe exchanged a quick glance that didn't escape Victoria's notice. She felt a cold knot form in her stomach as she realized they might have seen or heard something they shouldn't have. The last thing she wanted was for her financial crisis to steal their childhood innocence. Maya took a deep breath, the kind of breath a 9-year-old takes when they're about to ask a question they're not sure they want the answer to. "Mommy," she began carefully, "are we going to lose our house?" The question hit Victoria like a physical blow, and she nearly dropped her coffee cup. Her first instinct was to lie, to protect her daughters from the harsh reality of their situation. But the serious expression on Maya's face told her that her little girl already knew more than she was letting on. Zoe's eyes filled with tears as she waited for her mother's answer, and Victoria realized that the time for pretending everything was okay had come to an end. Victoria knelt down and took both her daughters' hands in hers, looking into their worried faces with a heavy heart. "Sweetheart," she said to Maya, "Mommy has been having some money problems since Daddy died. The hospital where Mommy works doesn't pay enough for us to keep up with all our bills, and sometimes grown-ups have to make very difficult decisions." She paused, trying to find words that would be honest, but not terrifying for children their age. "We might have to find a new place to live for a while, but no matter what happens, we'll be together, and Mommy will take care of you both. I promise you that our family is strong, and we'll get through this just like we got through losing Daddy. But I don't want to leave our house," Zoe sobbed, throwing her arms around Victoria's neck. "This is where Daddy lived with us. This is where all our memories are." Victoria's heart shattered as she held her youngest daughter, feeling the weight of yet another loss she was powerless to prevent. Maya, however, had a different look in her eyes, not resignation, but determination. She had inherited her father's stubborn streak and her mother's fierce protective instincts. "Mommy," Maya said firmly, wiping away her own tears, "we have to do something. We can't just let them take our house away. There has to be someone who can help us. There has to be a way to fix this." The questions came flooding out then, all the worries that Maya and Zoe had been holding inside for weeks. Where would they live? Would they have to change schools? Would they be able to take their toys and clothes? What about their neighbors and friends? Victoria answered each question as honestly as she could, explaining that they might have to stay in a shelter temporarily, that yes, they would probably have to change schools, but that they would take their most important belongings with them. She watched her daughters process this information with a maturity that broke her heart. They were so young to be dealing with such adult problems, so young to have their security ripped away from them again. That evening, after Victoria had tucked them into bed and gone to clean up the kitchen, Maya and Zoe whispered urgently in their shared bedroom. "We have to help Mommy," Maya said fiercely. "She's working so hard, but it's not enough. There has to be someone who can help our family. Remember that rich man on TV who helped build the new children's wing at the hospital? Alexander Cross?" Zoe nodded eagerly. "Maybe you would help us too. Maybe if we wrote him a letter and told him about Mommy and how hard she works and how good she is, maybe he would give us the money to save our house." Maya's eyes lit up with hope and determination. "That's exactly what we're going to do. Tomorrow," Maya whispered, "we're going to figure out how to contact Alexander Cross. We're going to save our family, Zoe. We're not going to let Mommy lose everything like she did when Daddy died." The two sisters held hands in the darkness, drawing strength from each other and from the fierce love they felt for their mother. They were just children, but they had already learned that sometimes the people you love most need you to be brave for them. Outside their window, the city lights twinkled in the distance, and somewhere among those lights lived the man who might be able to change their destiny, if only two determined little girls could find a way to reach him. The next morning, Maya and Zoe walked to school with a new sense of purpose burning in their hearts. While other children chatted about cartoons and playground games, the two sisters were planning what might be the most important mission of their young lives. Maya had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with ideas about how to contact the mysterious billionaire who had captured their attention. She knew that Alexander Cross was rich enough to help their family, but she also knew that rich people probably got asked for help all the time. They would have to be smart about this, and they would have to be brave in a way that most children never had to be. As they approached the school building, Maya squeezed Zoe's hand and whispered that today was the day they would start saving their family. During lunch break, Maya approached her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, with carefully rehearsed innocence. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I'm doing a report about successful business people in Austin, and I want to learn about Alexander Cross. Can I use the library computer to research him?" Mrs. Henderson smiled warmly, pleased to see one of her students showing interest in current events and local business leaders. "Of course, Maya. What a wonderful choice for your report. Mr. Cross has done so many good things for our community. You should look up his work with the Children's Hospital and the scholarship programs he's funded." Maya's heart raced with excitement as she realized her plan was working. She wasn't technically lying. She did want to learn about Alexander Cross, just not for a school report. She was learning about him to save her family's home. In the school library, Maya and Zoe huddled together in front of the computer screen, their eyes wide as they discovered just how wealthy and powerful Alexander Cross really was. The search results showed pictures of him cutting ribbons at hospital openings, donating money to schools, and speaking at charity events. He was 42 years old, lived in a mansion in the hills outside Austin, and was worth more money than the girls could even comprehend. But most importantly, they read story after story about his charitable work, how he had funded a new wing at Austin Children's Hospital, how he had created scholarship programs for underprivileged students, how he had helped rebuild homes after the tornado that hit East Austin 2 years ago. Maya felt her hope growing with each article they read. This man clearly cared about helping people, especially families in need. "Look at this article," Maya whispered excitedly to Zoe, pointing at a news story from the previous year. "It says here that Mr. Cross lost his own mother when he was just 10 years old, and that's why he started helping other families. He knows what it's like to lose someone you love." Zoe's eyes filled with tears as she read the article, which described how Alexander's mother had died of pneumonia when he was a child, leaving him and his father alone. The article mentioned that Alexander often said his mother's death taught him the importance of helping others during their darkest moments. "Maybe he'll understand about us losing Daddy," Zoe whispered hopefully. "Maybe he'll want to help us, because he knows how it feels to have your family broken apart." Maya nodded, feeling more confident than ever that they were on the right track. Maya began taking careful notes about everything they learned, writing down the address of Alexander's company, Cross Industries, which was located in a gleaming office tower downtown. She wrote down facts about his charitable work, his personal history, and most importantly, she wrote down quotes from interviews where he talked about his commitment to helping families in crisis. In one interview, he had said that no child should have to worry about losing their home or going hungry, and that successful people had a responsibility to lift up those who were struggling. Maya copied those exact words in her notebook, planning to reference them in the letter she would write. If Alexander Cross truly believed what he said in that interview, then surely he would want to help a hardworking nurse and her 2 daughters who were about to lose everything through no fault of their own. Walking home from school that afternoon, Maya and Zoe felt more hopeful than they had in weeks. They had a plan now, a real plan that might actually work. Maya clutched her notebook full of research about Alexander Cross, while Zoe carried printouts of articles about his charitable work that the librarian had helped them make. They talked excitedly about what they would write in their letter, how they would explain their situation, and what they would ask for. Maya insisted that they had to be completely honest about everything, about their father's death, about their mother's struggle to pay the bills, about the foreclosure notice. She was convinced that if they told their story with complete honesty, Alexander Cross would be moved to help them, just like he had helped so many other families in need. That afternoon, while Victoria was at work, Maya sat down at the kitchen table with a blank piece of paper and her best pencil. She had never written anything as important as this letter, and she wanted every word to be perfect. "Dear Mr. Cross," she began, her handwriting careful and neat. "My name is Maya Mitchell, and I am 9 years old. My sister Zoe is 7. We are writing to you because our family needs help, and we have read about all the good things you do for people in Austin." She paused, chewing on the end of her pencil as she thought about how to explain their situation without sounding like they were just asking for money. She wanted Alexander Cross to understand that they weren't looking for charity. They were looking for hope, for a chance to keep their family together in the home where their father's memory still lived. "Our daddy died 3 years ago in a car accident," Maya continued writing, with Zoe helping her choose the right words. "Our mommy works very hard as a nurse at the hospital, but she doesn't make enough money to pay all our bills. The bank is going to take our house away in 30 days, and Mommy says we might have to live in a shelter. We don't want to leave our house because it's where Daddy lived with us, and it's where all our memories are." Zoe added her own thoughts to the letter, suggesting that Maya mention how kind and caring their mother was, how she helped sick people at the hospital every day, and how she deserved better than to lose her home because she couldn't afford the payments. The girls worked together for over an hour, crafting each sentence with the seriousness of diplomats negotiating a peace treaty. When the letter was finished, Maya read it aloud to Zoe, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We're not asking you to give us money for free," she read. "We are asking you to help our mommy keep working and paying our bills so we can stay in our house. Maybe you could pay the bank what we owe, and then our mommy could pay you back a little bit each month when she gets paid from the hospital. We promise we are a good family who deserves a second chance. Our daddy always told us that there are angels in the world who help people when they need it most. We hope you might be our angel." The letter ended with both girls' signatures and a drawing that Zoe had made of their family, stick figures representing Victoria, Maya, and Zoe standing in front of a simple house with a big heart floating above it. "Now comes the hard part," Maya said as they folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. "We have to figure out how to get this letter to Mr. Cross, and we have to do it soon because Mommy said we only have 30 days. Zoe suggested that they could mail it to his office, but Maya shook her head. "Rich people probably get hundreds of letters every day," she explained. "If we mail it, it might just get thrown away by his secretary. We need to hand it to him personally, so he knows we're real and our story is real." The two sisters sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they were planning settling over them. They were going to try to meet one of the most powerful men in Austin, and they were going to ask him to save their family. "Tomorrow," Maya announced with determination, "we're going to find Alexander Cross." The next morning, Maya and Zoe went through their normal routine of getting ready for school, but both girls felt butterflies dancing in their stomachs. Maya had barely slept, going over their plan again and again in her mind, while Zoe had woken up several times during the night from dreams about meeting the mysterious billionaire. They packed their backpacks as usual, but Maya also carefully tucked the letter to Alexander Cross in her folder, along with a family photo she had taken from the living room. Today was the day they would skip school for the first time in their lives, and the weight of that decision made them both feel grown up and terrified at the same time. As they ate breakfast with Victoria, both girls struggled to act normal, knowing that in a few hours they would be embarking on the most important journey of their young lives. After saying goodbye to Victoria and walking toward school as usual, Maya and Zoe waited until their mother's car was out of sight before changing direction toward the city bus stop. Maya had studied the bus routes online and knew they needed to take 2 different buses to reach downtown Austin, where Cross Industries was located. The plan was risky. If they got caught, they would be in enormous trouble with both their mother and their school. But Maya had convinced Zoe that desperate times called for desperate measures, and losing their home was the most desperate situation they could imagine. As they approached the bus stop, Maya checked her pocket for the 20th time to make sure she had the money she had been saving from her allowance, enough to cover bus fare for both of them to get downtown and back. Sitting on the first bus, Maya and Zoe watched the familiar neighborhoods of their childhood give way to the bustling streets of downtown Austin. Neither girl had ever traveled this far from home without an adult, and everything seemed bigger and more intimidating than it had looked on television. Maya held Zoe's hand tightly as the bus swayed and lurched through traffic, while Zoe pressed her face to the window, watching the tall buildings grow larger as they approached the city center. Other passengers on the bus smiled at the 2 well-dressed children, probably assuming they were on a field trip or traveling with a parent who was seated elsewhere. Maya felt guilty about deceiving all these kind strangers, but she reminded herself that they were doing this for their family, and sometimes good people had to break rules for the right reasons. When they finally reached the address Maya had written down, both girls stood on the sidewalk with their necks craned back, staring up at the gleaming glass tower that housed Cross Industries. The building was taller than anything in their neighborhood, with windows that reflected the sky and made it seem like it stretched all the way to heaven. Maya counted the floors until she lost track somewhere around 30, wondering which one contained Alexander Cross's office, and whether he was up there right now, completely unaware that 2 little girls had traveled across the city to ask for his help. The lobby visible through the enormous glass doors looked like something from a movie, with marble floors and chandeliers that probably cost more than their house. For a moment, Maya felt their courage wavering as she realized just how out of place 2 children from their modest neighborhood would be in such an elegant building. "Come on, Zoe," Maya said, taking a deep breath and squeezing her sister's hand. "We didn't come all this way to stand on the sidewalk. Mommy needs us to be brave, and Daddy would want us to fight for our family." The 2 girls walked through the massive glass doors into a lobby that was even more impressive than it had looked from outside. The ceiling soared high above their heads, the marble floors gleamed like mirrors, and well-dressed business people moved purposefully through the space, talking on phones and carrying important-looking briefcases. Maya and Zoe felt tiny and out of place in their school clothes, but Maya reminded herself that they had every right to be here. They weren't asking for charity, they were asking for a chance, and that was something every person deserved, no matter how old they were or how much money their family had. The receptionist behind the large marble desk looked up as Maya and Zoe approached, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to gentle concern when she saw two young children standing before her without any adults. "Can I help you, sweethearts?" she asked, her voice kind but puzzled. Maya's heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears, but she forced herself to speak clearly and confidently. "Yes, ma'am," she said, trying to sound more grown-up than her 9 years. "We need to see Mr. Alexander Cross, please. It's very important. We have a meeting with him." The receptionist, whose nameplate read Mrs. Patricia Williams, smiled gently but shook her head. "I'm sorry, honey, but Mr. Cross doesn't have any appointments with children today. Are you here with your parents? Perhaps I can help you find them?" Maya had anticipated this response and was ready with her carefully rehearsed explanation. "Mrs. Williams," she said, reading the nameplate and using her most polite voice, "we came here by ourselves because our family is in trouble and we need Mr. Cross's help. We know he's a very busy and important man, but we also know he cares about helping families, and we really need someone to listen to us. Please, could you just tell him that Maya and Zoe Mitchell are here, and that we have something very important to give him?" Zoe stepped forward and added in her sweetest 7-year-old voice, "We promise we won't take very much of his time. We just want to give him a letter we wrote, and then we'll go back to school." Patricia Williams found herself genuinely moved by the sincerity and desperation in these two young faces, and something in their manner told her this wasn't a prank or a childhood whim. Patricia Williams had worked as Alexander Cross's receptionist for over 10 years, and she had developed a sixth sense for reading people and situations. There was something about these two children that told her their visit was genuine and important, even if it was highly unusual. Against her better judgment and all company protocols, she picked up her phone and dialed Alexander's direct line. "Mr. Cross," she said when he answered, "I know this is irregular, but there are two young girls here who say they need to speak with you. They seem very sincere, and they've traveled here alone, which suggests this is quite serious to them. I think you might want to meet them." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Patricia could almost hear Alexander's surprise and confusion. Finally, his voice came through the speaker, curious despite his obvious reluctance to be interrupted during his busy day. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Alexander Cross stepped into the lobby, his expression a mixture of curiosity and bewilderment. He was exactly as Maya and Zoe had seen him in the newspaper photos, tall, distinguished, with kind eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. But seeing him in person was different from seeing his picture, and both girls felt a moment of intimidation as they realized they were about to speak to one of the most powerful men in Texas. Alexander approached them slowly, clearly puzzled by the situation, but not unkind. His voice was gentle when he spoke, the same voice they had heard in television interviews, but now it was directed at them personally. "So," he said, crouching down to their eye level, "I understand you two young ladies have something important to discuss with me. I have to admit, this is a first for me." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her backpack and pulled out the carefully folded letter, along with the family photo she had brought. "Mr. Cross," she began, her voice stronger than she had expected it to be, "my name is Maya Mitchell, and this is my sister Zoe. We wrote you a letter because our family needs help, and we heard that you help families who are in trouble. Our mommy works very hard as a nurse, but we're going to lose our house in 30 days if someone doesn't help us." She held out the letter with both hands, as if she were presenting something precious and fragile. Alexander took the letter and the photo, his expression growing more serious as he looked at the image of Victoria with her two daughters, all of them smiling in happier times. Something in their earnest faces and the obvious effort they had put into this mission touched a part of his heart that he usually kept carefully protected in the business world. Alexander Cross stepped out of the elevator with the sharp, impatient stride of a man whose valuable time had been interrupted by something he assumed was trivial. His expression was stern and businesslike as he approached the two children, clearly annoyed at having his afternoon schedule disrupted. He had been in the middle of reviewing quarterly reports when Patricia called, and his first instinct was to have security escort these children back to wherever they belonged. "Patricia," he said curtly to his receptionist, "what exactly is this about? I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to having his time treated as precious, and both Maya and Zoe instinctively stepped closer together, suddenly feeling very small and out of place in this intimidating world of marble floors and expensive suits. Maya's courage nearly failed her as she looked up at the imposing figure of Alexander Cross. This wasn't the warm, smiling man from the charity photos. This was a businessman who clearly didn't appreciate being bothered by children. But thinking of her mother's tears and the foreclosure notice gave Maya the strength to speak. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "we're sorry to bother you, but we really need your help. We wrote you a letter." She held out the carefully folded paper with hands that shook from nervousness and determination. Alexander looked down at the letter with barely concealed irritation, his initial thought being that this was some kind of school project that had gotten out of hand. "Young lady," he said impatiently, "I don't know how you got past security, but this is highly inappropriate. Where are your parents?" Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized their plan was failing before it had even begun. Alexander's cold reception was nothing like what she had imagined, and Zoe had started to cry quietly behind her. "Please, Mr. Cross," Maya said desperately, "our daddy died 3 years ago, and our mommy is going to lose our house in 30 days. We saw on TV how you help families, and we thought maybe—" Alexander's expression grew even more stern as he interrupted. "This is completely unacceptable. Children do not skip school to bother busy adults with family problems. I'm calling your school immediately." But as he reached for his phone, something in Maya's desperate expression made him pause. The tears in her eyes weren't the crocodile tears of a spoiled child. They were the genuine desperation of someone facing real catastrophe. Against his better judgment and his instinct to end this interruption immediately, Alexander found himself taking the letter from Maya's outstretched hand. Perhaps it was the way her voice had cracked when she mentioned her father's death, or maybe it was the sight of 7-year-old Zoe trying so hard to be brave while tears streamed down her face. "Fine," he said curtly. "I'll look at your letter, but then you're going straight back to school." As he unfolded the paper and began to read Maya's careful handwriting, his expression started to change. The letter was articulate and heartfelt, detailing their father's death, their mother's struggles as a nurse, and the impending foreclosure with a maturity that surprised him. This wasn't a child's whim. This was a desperate family's last hope, delivered by 2 little girls who had exhausted all other options. As Alexander continued reading, his irritation began to transform into something else entirely. The letter described Victoria's work as a nurse, her dedication to helping others even while struggling to support her own family, and the girls' desperate desire to save their home where their father's memory still lived. When he reached the part where Maya wrote about not wanting charity but asking for a chance to pay him back, Alexander felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. These children weren't asking for a handout, they were asking for hope. "Your mother is a nurse?" he asked, his voice noticeably softer than before. Maya nodded eagerly and said, "She works at Austin General Hospital. She helps sick people get better, but she doesn't make enough money to keep our house." Zoe added through her tears, "Mommy says nurses don't get paid enough, but she loves helping people anyway." Alexander studied the family photo that Maya had included with the letter, seeing the happiness and love that had existed before tragedy struck this family. The woman in the picture looked tired but determined, and her daughters' faces radiated the kind of joy that only comes from being truly loved. Something about the image reminded him of his own childhood, of the photographs his father had kept of their family before his mother died. "This is a beautiful family," he said quietly, his businesslike demeanor beginning to crack. "Tell me about your mother. What kind of person is she?" Maya's face lit up as she began describing Victoria's kindness, her long hours at the hospital, her determination to provide for her daughters despite overwhelming odds. As Alexander listened, he found himself genuinely intrigued by this woman who had raised 2 such remarkable children, while facing circumstances that would have broken many people. Alexander found himself in an unexpected internal struggle. His logical business mind told him that getting involved in random family crises was not how successful people operated, but something about these two brave children had awakened memories and emotions he usually kept buried. "Girls," he said, his voice much gentler than it had been minutes before, "what you've done today shows incredible courage, but it also shows that your family is in more trouble than children should have to handle. I need you to understand that I can't make any promises right now." Maya's face fell slightly, but she nodded and said, "We understand, Mr. Cross. We just hope that maybe you would care enough to try." The simple honesty of her words hit Alexander harder than any business presentation ever had, and he realized that these children had done something no one else had managed to do in years. They had touched his heart. Alexander stood silently for several moments, processing everything he had learned and trying to reconcile his usual business approach with the genuine human need standing before him. These children had risked everything to save their family, and their mother clearly had no idea they were here. If he was going to help, he needed to understand the full situation before making any commitments. "Maya and Zoe," he said finally, "I'm going to look into your situation very carefully. But I need to do this the right way, which means I need to learn about your mother and your circumstances without interfering inappropriately." The girls looked confused, so he explained further. "I'm going to find out more about your family before I make any decisions. This is too important to rush into, and your mother deserves to have her privacy respected while I figure out how best to help." Alexander called his driver and arranged for Maya and Zoe to be taken safely back to school, promising them that he would be in touch soon, but that they must not tell their mother about their visit until he had time to investigate their situation properly. "I want you both to promise me something," he said seriously. "Promise me that you'll go back to being children and let the adults handle this from now on. What you did today was brave, but it was also dangerous, and I don't want you taking any more risks." Maya nodded solemnly and said, "We promise, Mr. Cross. But you will really try to help our mommy?" Alexander looked into her hopeful eyes and found himself making a commitment he hadn't planned to make. "Yes, Maya, I will find a way to help your family. But I'm going to do it properly, and that means your mother needs to be involved in any decisions that are made." After the girls left, Alexander stood alone in his lobby, holding their letter and family photo with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. His afternoon of quarterly reports suddenly seemed trivial compared to the real-world crisis that two brave children had brought to his attention. He had built his fortune and his reputation on making smart, calculated decisions, but sometimes the most important decisions were the ones that came from the heart rather than the head. Walking back to his office, Alexander began planning how he would discreetly investigate the Mitchell family situation. He would visit Austin General Hospital, speak with Victoria's supervisors, and get a complete picture of who this woman was before making any direct contact. If Maya and Zoe were right about their mother, then Victoria Mitchell was exactly the kind of person his foundation was meant to help, someone who worked hard, helped others, and deserved a second chance at stability and happiness. The next day, Alexander Cross did something he had never done before in his business career. He put on casual clothes and went to personally investigate someone without their knowledge. Austin General Hospital was bustling with activity as he walked through the corridors, trying to blend in among the visitors and families. He had called ahead and arranged a meeting with the hospital administrator under the pretense of discussing potential charitable donations. But his real mission was to learn about Victoria Mitchell. As he observed the hospital staff in action, Alexander was struck by the dedication and compassion he witnessed. Nurses moved efficiently from room to room, caring for patients with genuine warmth despite being clearly overworked and understaffed. This was a world far removed from his corporate offices, a place where people's lives hung in the balance and money took second place to human need. Dr. Sarah Chun, the hospital administrator, welcomed Alexander warmly, clearly excited about the possibility of receiving a major donation from one of Austin's most prominent philanthropists. "Mr. Cross, we're honored by your interest in our hospital," she said as they sat in her office. "Our nursing staff is truly the heart of everything we do here." Alexander seized the opportunity to steer the conversation toward his real interest. I've heard wonderful things about the dedication of your nurses. I'm particularly interested in supporting single mothers who are working in healthcare. Do you have staff members who fit that description? Dr. Chun nodded enthusiastically and said, "Oh yes, we have several single mothers on our nursing staff. They're some of our most dedicated employees, though I know many of them struggle financially. Nursing salaries haven't kept pace with the cost of living, unfortunately." When Alexander carefully mentioned Victoria Mitchell by name, claiming he had heard about her dedication from a mutual acquaintance, Dr. Chen's face lit up immediately. "Victoria? Oh my goodness, she's one of our absolute best nurses. That woman has been through so much, but she never lets it affect her patient care. She lost her husband in a terrible accident a few years ago, and I know she's been struggling financially ever since." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her voice becoming more confidential. "Between you and me, Mr. Cross, Victoria works more hours than anyone should have to work, but she never complains. Her patients adore her, and her colleagues have nothing but respect for her dedication. If you're looking for someone who represents the very best of healthcare workers, Victoria Mitchell would be at the top of that list. I just wish we could pay our nurses what they truly deserve." Alexander spent the afternoon discreetly observing Victoria in action, and what he saw confirmed everything her daughters had told him. She moved through her duties with a combination of professional competence and genuine compassion that was remarkable to witness. He watched her calm a frightened child before a procedure, patiently explain medication instructions to an elderly man who had trouble hearing, and comfort a woman who had just received difficult news about her diagnosis. Even when dealing with difficult or demanding patients, Victoria maintained her composure and treated everyone with dignity and respect. Her colleagues clearly looked up to her, often seeking her advice on challenging cases and relying on her experience to guide newer nurses. Alexander could see why Maya and Zoe were so proud of their mother. She was exactly the kind of person who made the world better simply by being in it. During a break in his observation, Alexander struck up a conversation with one of Victoria's colleagues in the hospital break room. Nurse Janet Rodriguez had worked with Victoria for over 2 years and spoke about her with obvious affection and respect. "Victoria is the kind of nurse everyone wishes they could be," Janet said. "She's been through hell with losing her husband and trying to raise those 2 beautiful daughters alone, but she never brings her personal problems to work. If anything, I think her own struggles make her even more compassionate with patients who are going through difficult times." Janet paused and then added, "I just wish the hospital could do more to help nurses like Victoria. She works twice as many hours as anyone should have to work, but the pay just isn't enough for a single mother. It breaks my heart to see someone so good struggling so much." As Victoria's shift neared its end, Alexander positioned himself where he could observe her completing her final tasks of the day. Even exhausted after 12 hours of caring for patients, she meticulously completed her paperwork, ensuring that the night shift would have all the information they needed. She stayed late to comfort a patient who was nervous about surgery the next day, and she took time to explain discharge instructions to a family whose elderly father was going home after a long hospitalization. Alexander was struck by the contrast between Victoria's professional dedication and the personal crisis he knew she was facing at home. Here was a woman giving everything she had to help others, while privately struggling to keep her own family from falling apart. The injustice of it stirred something deep in Alexander's chest, a reminder of why he had started his foundation in the first place. Alexander followed Victoria's route home from a respectful distance, wanting to see the neighborhood where she and her daughters lived. The modest residential area was a world away from his own gated community in the hills, small but well-maintained houses where working families lived paycheck to paycheck. As Victoria's old sedan pulled into the driveway of a simple 2-story house, Alexander parked across the street and took in the scene. The house was clearly loved despite its modest size. Someone had planted flowers in the front yard and kept the lawn neat, showing that this family took pride in their home even as they struggled to keep it. The contrast between Victoria's dedication at the hospital and the financial crisis waiting for her at home made Alexander's determination to help even stronger. Alexander watched as Victoria gathered her things from her car and walked toward her front door with the slow, tired steps of someone who had been on her feet for 12 hours but still had hours of motherhood ahead of her. As she opened the door, he could hear the excited voices of Maya and Zoe calling out, "Mommy's home," and see the immediate transformation in Victoria's posture as she prepared to be strong for her daughters once again. The sight of this dedicated woman switching from exhausted healthcare worker to loving mother despite her own overwhelming problems touched Alexander more deeply than he had expected. This was exactly the kind of person his mother had taught him to help. Someone who put others before herself and deserved better than the hand life had dealt her. Through the kitchen window, Alexander could see the Mitchell family's evening routine unfolding. Victoria sat at the kitchen table helping Maya with her math homework while Zoe worked on a reading assignment beside them. Despite her exhaustion, Victoria was patient and encouraging, celebrating small victories and gently guiding the girls through difficult problems. The scene was one of perfect domestic tranquility, a loving mother helping her children learn and grow. But Alexander's trained eye caught the details that told a different story. He could see the stack of papers on the counter that were clearly bills, and the careful way Victoria was stretching what looked like a simple dinner to feed 3 people. This was a family doing everything right, but still losing the battle against circumstances beyond their control. As Alexander continued watching, he saw Victoria get up from the homework session to start dinner, and in that moment, the kitchen table came fully into view. Even from across the street, he could see the distinctive red lettering of foreclosure notices and final payment demands scattered among the school papers and homework assignments. The contrast was heartbreaking. Children's drawings and spelling tests mixed with legal documents that threatened to destroy their stability. Victoria returned to the table with simple sandwiches for dinner, and Alexander watched her smile and laugh with her daughters as if they were dining at the finest restaurant in the city. The dignity and strength this woman showed in the face of losing everything confirmed every positive thing he had heard about her character. As he drove away, Alexander felt more motivated than he had in years to use his resources to make a real difference in the lives of people who truly deserved help. The next morning, Alexander Cross arrived at his office with a clear mission and the kind of focused determination that had made him successful in business. But this time, his goal wasn't profit or market share. It was finding a way to help the Mitchell family while preserving Victoria's dignity. He spent the early hours crafting what he knew would have to be a carefully constructed fiction, a scholarship program that would allow him to help Victoria without making her feel like a charity case. Alexander understood that sometimes the most generous act was allowing someone to maintain their pride while receiving the help they desperately needed. He had learned this lesson when his own family had struggled after his mother's death, and he remembered how much it had meant when help came disguised as opportunity rather than pity. Working with his assistant Marcus Webb, Alexander carefully developed the framework for what he called the Austin Healthcare Professional Family Scholarship Program. The program would supposedly provide housing assistance and educational support to families of healthcare workers who demonstrated exceptional dedication to their communities. Marcus, Alexander explained, this needs to look completely legitimate. Create a full application process, eligibility requirements, and selection criteria that would naturally lead to Victoria Mitchell being chosen. Marcus, who had worked with Alexander long enough to understand his philanthropic methods, nodded approvingly. A scholarship program focused on single-parent healthcare workers with school-age children, he suggested. Mrs. Mitchell would be a perfect candidate based on merit alone. Alexander smiled at his assistant's understanding. Exactly. She needs to earn this, not receive it. Alexander personally reviewed every detail of the scholarship documentation, ensuring that it would pass scrutiny from someone as intelligent and cautious as Victoria Mitchell. The program would provide housing assistance in a nice neighborhood with good schools, plus educational support for the recipient's children and career development opportunities within the foundation's medical initiatives. The monetary amounts were generous, but not suspiciously so, and the requirements clearly favored dedicated healthcare professionals facing temporary financial hardship. The beauty of this approach, Alexander told himself as he finalized the details, is that Victoria truly does deserve this recognition. We're not creating a fake award. We're creating a real program with her as the obvious first recipient. Marcus made the initial contact with Victoria at the hospital, calling during her break to inform her that she had been selected for a prestigious scholarship program. Mrs. Mitchell, he said warmly, "Congratulations. You've been chosen as the first recipient of our new Austin Healthcare Professional Family Scholarship. Your supervisors at Austin General nominated you based on your exceptional patient care and dedication to the community." Victoria's voice on the other end was filled with confusion and disbelief. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake," she said. "I never applied for any scholarship program." Marcus explained that the program sought out deserving candidates through hospital nominations rather than applications, and that her selection was based entirely on her professional reputation and personal circumstances as a single mother working in healthcare. When Victoria arrived at the Cross Foundation that evening for what she believed was a scholarship award ceremony, Alexander personally presented her with the program details. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "this scholarship is designed to recognize healthcare professionals who exemplify the values we want to promote in our community: dedication, compassion, and service to others despite personal challenges." As he outlined the benefits, Victoria's expression grew increasingly skeptical. The program offered to pay off her existing debts, provide a house in a good neighborhood, and offer her an enhanced position within the foundation's medical outreach programs. "Mr. Cross," she said carefully, "this is incredibly generous, but it seems almost too perfect for my specific situation. Are you sure this is legitimate?" Victoria's natural intelligence and pride made her probe deeper into the scholarship program's details. "Mr. Cross, I have to ask, how many other recipients are there? When was this program established? And why does it seem tailored exactly to my circumstances?" Alexander had anticipated these questions and was prepared with carefully crafted responses that were technically truthful. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're our inaugural recipient. The program was established this year specifically because we recognized a gap in support for dedicated healthcare workers facing financial hardship. Your situation is precisely the type we designed this scholarship to address." Victoria studied his face intently, looking for any sign of deception or pity. "I appreciate the honor," she said slowly, "but I need time to think about this. It would change everything for my family, and I want to make sure I'm making the right decision." When Victoria returned home that evening, she found Maya and Zoe waiting anxiously in the living room. They had been wondering all day about their mother's mysterious meeting, and they could see from her expression that something significant had happened. "Mommy," Maya said carefully, "how did your meeting go? You look worried." Victoria sat down between her daughters and tried to explain the scholarship offer in terms they could understand. "A very nice man wants to give our family a special award that would help us keep our house and maybe even move to a better one," she said. "But Mommy is worried that it might be too good to be true." Zoe's eyes lit up with hope, while Maya's expression showed the same careful skepticism she had inherited from her mother. As Victoria explained more details about the scholarship program, Maya and Zoe exchanged meaningful glances that their mother didn't catch. Both girls recognized the name Alexander Cross from their secret visit, but they couldn't reveal their involvement without admitting they had skipped school and traveled across the city alone. "Mommy," Zoe said innocently, "if this man wants to help our family, maybe that means good things can happen to good people. You always help sick people at the hospital. Maybe now someone wants to help you." Maya nodded seriously and added, "You deserve good things to happen to us, Mommy. Maybe you should say yes." Victoria looked at her daughter's hopeful faces and felt her resistance beginning to weaken. Their simple faith that their mother deserved help was more persuasive than any argument Alexander could have made. Maya took her mother's hands and looked directly into her eyes with the serious expression of a child who had seen too much adult worry. "Mommy," she said, "you've been working so hard and you're so tired all the time. If someone wants to help us have a better life, maybe we should let them. Maybe Daddy sent this person to take care of us." The mention of David brought tears to Victoria's eyes, and she pulled both girls into a tight hug. Zoe whispered, "We don't want to lose our house, but if we have to move anyway, maybe we could move somewhere even better." Victoria felt the weight of their simple wisdom, and she realized that her pride was less important than her daughter's future. "You know what, girls?" she said, wiping away her tears. "Maybe you're right. Maybe sometimes we have to be brave enough to accept help when it comes from good people with good hearts." The next morning, Victoria called the Cross Foundation and asked to speak with Alexander Cross personally. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice steady but emotional, "I've discussed your scholarship offer with my daughters, and we would like to accept it gratefully. I want you to know that this opportunity means more to our family than I can adequately express." Alexander felt a surge of satisfaction and relief as he heard Victoria's acceptance. "Mrs. Mitchell," he replied, "I'm delighted to hear that. You and your daughters deserve this fresh start, and I'm honored that our foundation can be part of your family's new beginning. Welcome to the Cross Foundation family." As Victoria hung up the phone, Maya and Zoe cheered quietly, knowing that their secret mission had somehow succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, even though they could never tell their mother about their role in bringing this miracle into their lives. 6 months later, Victoria Mitchell had transformed from an overworked, financially stressed single mother into a confident program director at the Cross Foundation. Her new role managing community health outreach programs had allowed her to use her nursing expertise in ways she had never imagined possible. But more importantly, her own experience with near homelessness had inspired her to develop something entirely new, a comprehensive support program for families facing similar crises. Victoria understood firsthand the terror of losing everything despite working hard and doing everything right, and she was determined to create a safety net for other families walking that same terrifying path. The work gave her a sense of purpose that went beyond just earning a paycheck. She was turning her own painful experience into hope for others. Maya and Zoe had flourished in their new environment, attending an excellent elementary school where they were making new friends and excelling in their studies. The house that came with Victoria's scholarship was everything the girls had dreamed of, not luxurious, but comfortable and safe, with a small backyard where they could play in a neighborhood where children rode bikes and parents knew each other's names. Maya had joined the school's debate team, channeling her natural determination and intelligence into academic pursuits, while Zoe had discovered a talent for art and spent hours drawing pictures of their new life. Both girls had grown more confident and relaxed, no longer carrying the weight of adult worries that had aged them beyond their years. The constant fear of losing their home had been replaced with the security of knowing their mother was happy and successful in her work. Victoria stood before the Cross Foundation Board of Directors, presenting her most ambitious project yet, the Second Chance Family Program. The initiative would identify hardworking families facing foreclosure or eviction and provide them with comprehensive support, including temporary housing, job placement assistance, and financial counseling. "What makes this program different," Victoria explained passionately, "is that it's designed by someone who has lived through this crisis. We're not just offering charity, we're offering dignity, opportunity, and hope." The board members listened intently as Victoria outlined the program structure, which would help families rebuild their lives while contributing their skills to the community. In the back of the room, Alexander Cross watched with quiet pride, knowing that Victoria's vision came from the deepest kind of wisdom, experience transformed into compassion. Alexander had deliberately taken a background role in Victoria's new program, understanding that it needed to be her vision and her leadership that brought it to life. He provided funding and organizational support, but he made sure that Victoria received full credit for the program's development and implementation. During board meetings, Alexander would offer gentle guidance when asked, but he was careful never to overshadow Victoria's expertise or undermine her authority. He had learned that the most powerful kind of mentorship was the kind that empowered others to discover their own strength and capabilities. Watching Victoria flourish as a leader had become one of the most rewarding experiences of Alexander's business career, and he took pride in knowing that he had helped create the conditions for her success without trying to control or direct it. The first family to benefit from Victoria's Second Chance program was a young mother named Jessica with two small children. Facing eviction after her husband's injury left him unable to work. As Victoria sat across from Jessica in the foundation's family counseling room, she saw her own reflection from 6 months earlier. The same desperate hope mixed with wounded pride, the same determination to protect her children from adult worries. "Jessica," Victoria said gently, "I want you to know that accepting help doesn't make you weak or a failure. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is allow others to support you while you rebuild." Victoria's words carried the weight of lived experience, and Jessica could see in Victoria's confident demeanor that it was possible to emerge from crisis stronger and more purposeful than before. Maya and Zoe had become regular visitors to the foundation offices after school, and their relationship with Alexander had evolved into something beautifully familial. "Tio Alex," Zoe called out as she spotted him in the lobby, using the affectionate nickname that had developed naturally over the months. Alexander's face lit up as both girls ran to hug him, and he marveled at how much joy these two remarkable children had brought into his previously solitary life. Maya, now 10 and even more articulate than before, updated him on her debate team victories, while Zoe showed him her latest artwork depicting the foundation's mobile health clinics. Alexander had never married or had children of his own, but Maya and Zoe had taught him that family could be created through love and choice just as powerfully as through blood and law. Alexander found himself taking on the role of silent mentor and guardian angel, supporting Victoria's work from the shadows while allowing her to shine in the spotlight she deserved. During volunteer training sessions for the Second Chance program, he would slip into the back of the room to watch Victoria teach others how to approach families in crisis with dignity and respect. Her natural leadership abilities had blossomed under the foundation's support, and Alexander took quiet satisfaction in knowing that he had helped create the conditions for her transformation. He had learned that sometimes the most generous thing a wealthy person could do was provide opportunities and then step back to let others succeed on their own merits. Victoria's success belonged entirely to her, and Alexander was content to be the invisible hand that had helped make it possible. At the program's 6-month anniversary celebration, Victoria stood before a crowd of community leaders, foundation supporters, and families who had been helped by the Second Chance program. "What I learned during my own family's crisis," she said, her voice strong and clear, "is that hardworking people can face impossible circumstances through no fault of their own. But I also learned that when we support each other with dignity and respect, we can overcome any challenge." The audience included several families who had been helped by the program, and their presence testified to Victoria's vision and compassion. In the crowd, Alexander watched with the kind of pride usually reserved for family members, knowing that Victoria had transformed her own pain into a powerful force for good in the Austin community. That evening, Maya and Zoe presented Alexander with a handmade card they had created together, thanking him for everything he had done for their family. "Tio Alex," Maya said seriously, "we know you could have just given us money and walked away, but instead you gave us a chance to build a better life. You helped Mommy become the person she was always meant to be." Zoe added her own thoughts in her 8-year-old wisdom. "You're not just our friend, you're our family now. And families help each other forever." Alexander felt tears in his eyes as he read their heartfelt words, realizing that in helping the Mitchell family, he had found something he hadn't even known he was missing: the deep satisfaction of meaningful relationships and the joy of watching people he loved achieve their dreams. As the sun set over Austin, the four of them stood together in the foundation's garden, representing a family that had been forged not by blood but by circumstance, compassion, and choice. Victoria's Second Chance program was already helping dozens of families rebuild their lives, and plans were underway to expand it to other cities across Texas. Alexander continued to provide quiet support and guidance, content to be the silent partner who enabled others to succeed. Maya and Zoe had grown into confident, compassionate young girls who understood that their own experience with hardship had prepared them to help others facing similar challenges. "You know what I've learned?" Victoria said as they watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we ever do. Our family almost fell apart, but instead we became part of something bigger and more beautiful than we ever imagined. Alexander smiled and added, and sometimes strangers become family, and family becomes the most important thing of all. Maya and Zoe nodded in agreement, knowing that their secret mission 6 months ago had led to this moment. A new kind of family built on love, respect, and the shared commitment to lifting others up just as they have been lifted up themselves. What did you think of this incredible journey from desperation to hope? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how courage and kindness can transform lives. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories that prove families come in all different forms.